This is Opposing Viewpoints. I'm Tatum Everett, and it's Chargers week. The Vikings head to the West Coast to face a 5-3 AFC West leading team. And joining us on the show right now, Vikings team reporter Eric Smith, who is in Baltimore, and I think can agree with me, we cannot handle any more overtime games, Eric.
Yeah, no more overtime games, no more close games. I mean, it's pretty much been the same story every week. 7 of the Vikings' 8 games have been decided by one score, 7 points or less. The Vikings are 2-5 in those games, and it's draining, honestly, and it's time for the team to try to turn it around.
Meanwhile, our opponent this week, also not a stranger to close games, coming off a close win against Philadelphia last week, which brings in our guest of the show, Chargers team reporter Hayley Elwood. Hayley, thanks for joining us. I know the Chargers with the opposite record as the Vikings right now. What's the state of this team heading into the matchup?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, guys. You mentioned it, 5-3. The Chargers are atop that wild AFC West, where every team has 5 wins, but the Chargers lead it due to their wins over Vegas and Kansas City. So they're in a good place right now. And you can't talk about the state of this team without talking about the impact that first-year head coach Brandon Staley has made, along with a hallmark of going for it on 4th down, as we have heard. He's also big on building relationships and cultivating relationships with these players. It's something we heard about just this week with defensive tackle Justin Jones, where he said Staley, he's interested in what these players have to say. They're very collaborative. That's the environment that's going on here in Los Angeles. Talking through plays, talking about plays, Justin Jones said, he asked us what kind of blitzes we like if you're on that defensive side of the ball. And I think that collaboration is building to trust and has ultimately helped this team and guide this team to these 5 wins this season.
Yeah, Hayley, the Vikings are going to kind of model their own approach this week after their head coach. And Mike Zimmer probably said it best on Wednesday that it's time to fight. As we've talked about, there's been a lot of close games, almost all of them so far this season, but he likes the way the team is fighting. They compete. They're in almost every game. Like we said, it's just a matter of turning it around and trying to get a win. Zimmer will need that again this week because the Chargers are a good team, and the Vikings, as we've talked about, are coming off a tough loss in Baltimore, especially for the defense. The defense played 98 snaps, which I haven't seen in my time with the Vikings. Zimmer said he's never seen that in his almost 30 years in the NFL. So the Vikings they're tired, they're wary, but it's going to be up to them to kind of dig deep and try to get a win out in LA.
Hayley, the Chargers are led by quarterback Justin Herbert, the reigning offensive rookie of the year, which is a sore spot for some Vikings fans here who thought maybe Justin Jefferson should have snagged that award. But Herbert really having no slump in his sophomore season.
Yeah, this is the big Justin game, right, with Herbert and Jefferson. But look, along with that, Justin Herbert's also the reigning AFC Offensive Player of the Week due to his performance that he had against the Philadelphia Eagles, just 6 incompletions. And that is something that we're used to seeing. We're used to seeing those kinds of performances with Herbert. We hadn't seen them against the Ravens and against the Patriots, but he really turned it around this last week. 3 total touchdowns, 356 yards. Staley made a joke that he's probably bummed about those 6 incompletions, but a lot of his performance was also due to the play of this offensive line. He credited them, Staley credited them. He was never sacked, I believe only pressured twice. So if you give Herbert time, he will definitely make you pay out there.
Yeah, Hayley, the Vikings are definitely wary of Herbert and have praised him all week, especially for being a second-year quarterback. But if we look at the Minnesota defense in an area where they are going to focus on and where they've kind of focused on all season, that's the final 2 minutes of the first half. And the Vikings have allowed 45 points in that time span, which it's not good. And it happened again Sunday in Baltimore. Minnesota has a 17-3 lead. The Ravens get a late touchdown. They get some momentum. And then all of a sudden, Baltimore is able to climb back into the game. The Chargers have only scored 10 points offensively in that time span. So as the Vikings talk about, trying to stay fresh after those 98 plays, trying to get off the field, give their offense some plays, if they can succeed in that final 2 minutes, which they haven't really been able to do all season, that could be an area where they could flip the switch and finally get a win.
One matchup we'll have our eyes on is the Vikings run game as they go up against a Chargers defense that's last in the league in rushing yards. So, Hayley, what does the Chargers defense have to do up front to stop this Vikings running attack?
Yeah, you mentioned it, and it's something that they've talked about this week, and they've actually talked too about the fact that they feel like they've made strides over these last couple games. They've had some players who were out injured, gotten those guys back. So it comes down to sort of gelling together, getting those lineups back together. Justin Jones talked about it, deals with getting penetration up front. Brandon Staley mentioned trying to get negative plays on first and second down. They've been tested. They've faced some really, really good rushing attacks all season. You look at that Cleveland game, but this Vikings offense and their run game, no joke. This is a big, big test for the Chargers defense this week for sure.
And as we switch over to the Vikings offense, I feel like I've been talking about the same point the last few weeks. It's find some consistency. Every week we talk about how hot the Vikings offense starts, and they did it again. Baltimore scored on the first possession. They scored on the second possession. But after those first two drives, which totaled almost 175 yards, the rest of the game was only about 130 yards of offense. And after those first two touchdowns, the offense didn't score for over 40 minutes. And players and coaches are frustrated by it for sure. Adam Thielen said on Monday, it's getting old talking about this over and over and over. And it's pretty much up to them to just go out and do it at this point. They have the playmakers, they have the skill players. It's just finding a way to be consistent throughout the whole 60-minute effort.
Speaking of big-time performances, we have a big one on Sunday, and obviously there's a huge winning formula that goes into that. So, Hayley, we'll have you answer this question. The Chargers win if
they play complementary football, and not in the terms of maybe run game and pass game, but terms of offense and defense. And that was something that this team talked about was key in the win over the Eagles. Derwin James mentioned it earlier this week. He said that when the defense needed to come up with a stop for the offense, they did. And on that final drive, when the defense was hoping that the offense would control the clock and keep that drive going to kick the game-winning field goal, they certainly did. Brandon Staley said his goal on that final 6-minute drive was to have the offense keep the ball and hold on to it. Like I said, they did. So playing complementary football on both sides of the ball, we'll see what happens this week.
All right, Eric, and now it's your turn to answer the question, but we'll flip it. The Vikings win if.
I'm going to go a similar theme that Hayley said. They need to score points off turnovers, and that kind of blends the offense and defense together. In the last 4 games, the Vikings defense has 4 takeaways, and the Vikings offense has only scored 3 points, which is not going to get it done. I think on the season, when the Vikings have a +2 turnover differential in the game, they're 1-3, and that doesn't really add up because most of the time, if you can win the turnover battle, you're probably going to win the game. And like we said, it just hasn't clicked for the Vikings so far this season. The defense, like I said, is going to be tired after playing 98 plays against Baltimore. And if they can make a turnover, the Vikings need to take advantage of that and score points. With how close these games have been, if the Vikings can get an extra 3 points here, an extra 7 points here, maybe we won't have a close game Sunday in LA. I'm not going to bet on that based on how the season has gone, but the Vikings need to find any way to find a way to get a win.
Yes, there are several statistical anomalies in this season. We're hoping Sunday is not going to be like that for the Vikings. Hayley, we can't wait to see you out in SoFi. Thank you so much for joining us here on Opposing Viewpoints. For Vikings team reporter Eric Smith and Chargers team reporter Hayley Elwood, I'm Tatum Everett. Thanks for watching.